Welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by CaliberMind. Our goal on the RMR is to help marketers move from subject matter experts to strategic business partners. I'm your host, Camela Thompson, and today I'm thrilled to introduce Carly Cais. Carly, how about you introduce yourself?
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for including me today.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, my name is Carly Cais, and my last name is spelled a little weird. It's C-A-I-S instead of C-A-S-E, but it's pronounced the same. I've been working in various aspects of digital marketing for over 20 years at this point. And I have at this point now founded my own consultancy to other companies that are SaaS companies in the B2B space.
We were talking a bit before we jumped on the podcast, as we're apt to do. And you told me a bit about your background and how it set you up for your role as managing partner. I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, my background in marketing was kind of not a straight shot from point A to point B. It was kind of a meandering walk through the woods where I did quite a lot of different roles, and really doing the different roles and getting expertise in a variety of different subjects within a business allowed me to be able to really step back from the specialization that a lot of marketing requires and be able to look at things with a more holistic business approach to try to devise marketing and sales solutions that really work for the business as a whole.
I love it. I love it. So did that include sales operations, sales roles, those sorts of things?
Yeah, so not sales roles specifically, but I did start in digital marketing. I actually built websites way back in 2001 with Microsoft Front Page. So I was creating websites at the beginning of my career and then doing graphic design, and eventually moved into roles where I was doing sales operations and CRM administration, and then sales enablement and sales support. And so that really bridging the gap from just a marketing approach to someone who really needed to focus solely on the sales team, their productivity, their day-to-day KPIs, and their month-to-month KPIs and productivity really changed how I approached marketing in general and really leveled up my skills in marketing.
We see a lot of businesses kind of trending towards combining the sales and marketing functions, and we could debate that quite a bit. But I think that revenue operations, people within each siloed department don't always realize how much their skill sets do branch over to the other functions, because an analyst in sales is going to have the skill sets we need for an analyst in marketing. And then if you understand data structure and technology and the kind of linear thought process it takes to walk through an automation in either MarTech or in a CRM, I think people kind of paint themselves in a corner when they really don't need to be. Do you find that to be true at all?
Yeah, I think that's a great assessment. I think that really for maybe the last decade or so, at least early on in the 2000s and then the 2010s, a lot of people would really kind of start in marketing or start in sales and kind of stay there. But as you mentioned, with revenue operations really gaining more and more steam, coming to the forefront of a lot of businesses realizing they need this role, people are beginning to realize, I feel, that their skill sets are transferable and that the two departments, marketing and sales, really aren't that siloed. And as you said, sort of that data analytics ability, the ability to think logically and sequentially, also incorporating automations into not just the marketing and sales function, but the business as a whole, is something that's really needed in revenue operations in general. And so I am beginning to see people kind of moving from sort of that one silo or to the other silo, and then moving into revenue operations, which kind of spans the whole business.
Yeah, that just seems like it really opens a lot of different options for people. But what kind of skill sets do you look for in people at ElleSpark?
So myself and my co-founder, who is a 25-year veteran of sales, Kathy Hughes, we look for people to work with who have a business sense, who really have a broad skill set in terms of sales operations, sales, marketing operations, revenue operations, data analytics, somebody who is kind of that T-shaped marketer or T-shaped person where they've worked worked in a lot of different departments in a variety of different companies. So they're able to come to our clients and really look at their business and where their business stands today and say, you know what, for companies like you, these are the solutions that work at your level and your stage of growth and your size of business right now. And so for that, for that skill set to be there, you really do need to have just that variety and also have had a lot of mistakes in your past where you've tried stuff, you've been bold enough to make those mistakes and learn from them. Because we've found that when you're just in a role and you're just sort of keeping the lights on, keeping things running, and you're not making sort of bold moves and trying new things, attempting changes at your organization, you're not going to get that skill set to really understand, okay, so this is what happens when we try it in the real world. So we're looking for people who are not afraid of making the mistakes and who've just tried a lot and have that broad background.
So when's the right time to specialize? Because I think we all see a lot of specialists out there and there's a place for that, a big place for them because we all need them so much. But when do you see deep specialization really coming into use in somebody's career?
That's a great question. I think that in someone's career early on, there's a lot of sort of generalization that you need in order to be most attractive to a variety of different roles and a variety of different companies. So early on in someone's career, I see the more general skill set being more applicable. And it's kind of like the specialized skill set is something that can be developed and should be developed on the job. It's not something really you can take courses in it, but until you have practical experience in it, you really aren't able to talk about it in the real world and talk about the actual ramifications of that specialty in a functioning company and sort of what it looks like 30 days, 90 days, 120 days out. And so I would say that specialization, it's good to have the course background or the class background or the extra learning that you've done early on, but you're not going to really get into it and probably shouldn't get into it until you're in a role and can really deeply specialize in practical application.
And I love that you say probably shouldn't, because I think a big part of this is realizing what you love and what you want to do. A lot of us don't know that right away. So if you have exposure to different systems, different programming languages, that sort of thing, and you say, oh, I get this, I like it, I space out when I do it, I forget to go home, I really enjoy it, go for it.
Yeah. And it's something that you aren't going to know in that isolation or early on when you are that generalist. And I remember kind of early on in my career, I was exposed to Salesforce and I had to set up one-off HTML marketing emails to be sent out of Salesforce. And I was absolutely terrified of the system. I didn't want to do a single thing in there because I was so scared of messing it up. And then 3 years later, I'd come into a company as the marketing manager, and it turned out that their Salesforce instance wasn't properly set up. So everything that I was doing in marketing wasn't being reported on. So we had to hire a consultant, and I worked very closely with her to reconfigure the whole system and kind of figure out, well, what's the lead routing methods? Like, what are the lead sources? Like, what historical opportunities have we had? Like, how can we report on this all in one system? And I found that I loved Salesforce. I just had an aptitude for it and I love working in it. I love like cleaning it up, dusting it off and making it look all shiny and with everything in the right place and all the automations and everything there. But I would never have known that as a marketer and staying in my marketing wheelhouse until I'd actually gotten into the system and really seen how it worked and really started to clean up Excel sheets and then seeing the results of how quickly the sales team could move. Once the system was clean and properly working and automated for them, that really clued me into just how important understanding the systems that run the business is, as well as creating all the creative and the fun marketing ideas. You have to really have your head wrapped around the systems that run the business.
Yeah, and I think switching roles helps you build natural empathy for people who are in that position. So as a CRM administrator in sales, I was often very frustrated with the marketing team because they didn't realize that the changes they were making to their marketing automation platform ran downstream and sometimes blew things up or locked people out of the system at quarter end, but that's a different story. So, but actually being in that role as a marketing operations manager and seeing all of the different systems that you have to understand in addition to the marketing automation platform gave me a lot more understanding of why it was so difficult to consistently get the numbers right every single quarter, or why it was so difficult to understand ROI and those sorts of things. I think, though, it was very good to have that background knowledge in the CRM, because you have to know how the two pieces connect together. They're just so entwined.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
So we've talked a bit about how this diversity and skill sets have benefited you in your own career, but I'd love to talk about it from a little bit more of an abstract angle. So, and it's kind of coming from my own experience running my own business. With all of the different experience you have, did you find that you had a lot of the skill sets you were worried about not having as you started this business venture?
Any new business, you're kind of, worried, well, do I really have what it takes? Do I really know what's going on? Can I really go into someone else's business, and can I really truly assist them from an outside standpoint? And of course, being outside someone's business adds a whole level of new challenges, which are not there when you're working inside of someone's business. But I did find that really just my broad skill set and just different variety of companies that I'd worked in roles where I had been there a year and a half, 2 years, enough to really get my feet wet, to really set everything up the way it needed to be, and really just like get everything running and clean and working and fixed, was a really great primer to be able to go into other businesses that needed that exact same thing, so that I could then, sort everything out. And then we could start slotting in more full-time roles for the business that could start to maintain what had already been built and build on what was already there. So awesome. Yeah, there was definitely those moments of, I don't know if I have what it takes, but then, as I'm talking to people more and more, it's such a need out there, at least in SaaS, to have a true sales process, to have sales and marketing operations, no matter how early on the company is, and start to build your marketing process once you have your sales process dialed in.
The Growth Operations Community is a professional network focused on helping organizations drive business growth. They inspire, lift, and share thought leadership, best practices, and learnings for a profession that is continually transforming and growing. Like those of us at the RMR, Growth Ops believes growth happens when marketing, sales, and customer success align to deliver an excellent customer experience. Visit thegrowthopscommunity.org today to join a community of collaborative professionals. Have you been burned by attribution? Are you tired of fighting with salespeople over target accounts and lead scores? We've all been there. And that's because traditional marketing analytics tools bolt onto your CRM and calculate attribution and engagement scores on the data as it is. And let's face it, most of the time, your CRM data is far from perfect. Caliber Mind is unique because it pulls data from all your sources, not just your CRM, into a data platform. Caliber Mind unifies your information, which means you can attribute dollars to website activity, standard Salesforce campaign activity, and more, without wasting time in spreadsheets. Ditch the spreadsheets and check out a new way to analyze revenue data with Caliber Mind at calibermind.com. Yeah, imposter syndrome is something we all have. I think at one time or another, but it's so nice to hear that the approach you had really set you up for that consultative angle. Another trend we're seeing in the market is that a lot of growing or high growth businesses are trying to hire unicorns that can do it all. So this means, in some cases, managing both the CRM and the marketing automation platforms as the sole administrator. And, I don't know that I agree with that approach. I think it's wonderful when people have experience in both of those things, but it just seems like there's a lack of understanding of how many hours go into each of those functions. Are you seeing the same thing?
I'm seeing it definitely not across the board, but in certain companies at a certain growth phase where they're trying to get the person who can do it all. And they're trying to combine multiple roles into one that are typically very different functions. And it's kind of a concerning trend because you really aren't going to get anybody who has enough time to do both roles. We're all limited to a certain number of hours in the week.
Right.
And I definitely made this mistake early in my career where I was very much approaching companies and saying, oh, I can do it all. I can run your marketing. I can run your sales ops. I can do the CRM. I can do everything. And so companies at a certain stage of growth said, ooh, this is really exciting. Yeah, we want one person, one salary, one go-to expert.
And
that does
one
everything.
really burned out human being.
Yeah, so that basically, I mean, it basically led me to really taking on like at least 3 roles, sometimes 5, where I was just one person and I was doing all of these things across the board. And it was my fault, definitely, for positioning myself that way in the first place. You know, it's how you kind of, what you put out there is what comes back, right? And so what came back to me were companies that were looking to skimp, for lack of a better word, on enough hires to fill these roles, which are in fact distinct roles and do require somewhat different skill sets. And I basically set myself up for burnout just completely after a year and a half or so of working that way. And it's not sustainable for an individual. And it also means that in any one system or function, there are things you're going to miss. Like it's just human nature when you have your attention so divided, and you're not going to be able to really bring a growth mindset to one system or process or function that you oversee, because you're just so bogged down in keeping the lights on with all 3 of your functions. And I've seen it really limit company growth when they do try to bundle it all into one person, because that person just can't do it all. No matter how much they may try and how good they may be, they just can't do it all, and they can't sustain the company growth, really.
Yeah, and there's been quite a bit of research around how long it takes people to context switch. It could be 25 minutes. So if you're moving someone, if you have an analyst, map, CRM manager in one, every time they move from one system to another, it takes time to kind of readjust and think about, okay, what language am I using now? But the reason why I bring this up to begin with is for the potential hiring managers out there and the people who are newer and trying to grow their careers and really ambitious. I think it is a really important distinction to make between taking opportunities where you're learning new things as opposed to trying to do multiple roles in a single job.
Yeah. And I'm a very big proponent of do one thing at a time. Like really focus on one thing, do it really, really well, set up systems and automations, and, whatever you can do to sort of 4-hour work week it or whatever, set it up in a way that it can be handed off to somebody else and handed off to somebody else and get into a new role and focus solely on that. And that's also how I run my marketing, how I run my consulting, is really a lot of companies want to like just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And it's just like, okay, yes, you have to do it, but you're on a limited budget. So really double down on just one thing and make it work really well. And it's the same for someone in a role, do the one thing, make it work really well, automate the heck out of it, like really own it as an expert, and then train your replacement, and hire someone else, like get yourself out of there. And basically I always advise people to, when they're in a role, to be building all of the systems and processes for that role as if they're basically removing themselves from it eventually, as they think about your exit strategy from the role from the beginning.
Yeah, that's why I'm such a big fan of documentation too. So people understand the reasoning behind everything being put together and not just come into it and be like, well, why did they do
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Which is understandable. So people who are interested into first going into marketing or revenue operations or looking to really make themselves more marketable as somebody to hire, what are the systems or analytical skills that are really in high demand that you're seeing right now?
Yeah, and this is kind of something that I've been seeing for probably the last 5 years or so. If you're a marketer, learn Salesforce. Like it is the granddaddy of all CRMs, but it's so transferable to any other CRM out there, HubSpot, Pipedrive, whatever. Learn Salesforce like your life depended on it. And there's online courses you can take, there's certifications you can take that are from Salesforce and ridiculously expensive. But
Yeah.
it's good to have this skill set, because the more you learn about a CRM system, and especially one of the most complex ones out there, it makes you extremely valuable. Because you had talked about earlier, well, when the marketing team makes changes to the automation in the system, it affects the CRM. As a marketer, you can then, put together your campaigns, you can then, outline them, and then also say in Salesforce, these fields will be affected, or this automation, this process builder that's in place will be affected. And so knowing the sort of downstream effects of what you're doing is so critical. And so, yeah, if Salesforce isn't available to you as, something that you can learn, then learn HubSpot. HubSpot has a free CRM, and you can, take free courses on it. So learn a CRM, and I would recommend Salesforce as the most in-demand one, so that you can at least come to the table saying, yes, I'm a marketer, but I also can plan for the downstream effects of marketing and ensure consistent reporting on both marketing and sales activities, so that we're not just talking about marketing sent X number of emails and this is the open rate and this was the click-through rate. No, we're talking about influenced revenue. We're talking about, here is what actually has happened in the pipeline and in the company in terms of, the CAC, the LTV, like everything that marketing is influencing, you can show that pull through. And if you don't have CRM experience, and I mean pretty deep CRM experience, at least in being able to pull reports and create dashboards and understand the fields that the business runs on, it's going to limit your ability to show that pull through and really show the value of what you're doing. And so as a marketer, you're often going to find that you have to advocate for your value, because you don't necessarily have the CRM background to be able to show it, or to work with the CRM administrator to be able to show it. So I always advocate that, you want that CRM ability and that reporting capability in a marketer who can at least understand it and show their value without having to just fight for it all the time.
That is such wonderful advice. And I will say that Salesforce Trailhead is amazing. It allows you to go hands-on. They give you data sets that you can actually work with. They do a really good job.
It's an awesome, and they have hoodies too. So
yeah, always a perk. I like socks too, so if they could take note of that. But I love how you bring up reporting too, because knowing the right metrics, how they're defined, and how the business uses them is really every business's love language, I swear. And I don't think people understand that if they're using things like productivity and ROI incorrectly in a business setting, that really damages your credibility with the entire business. So I see that misused a lot with marketers. And I think the more we familiarize ourselves with how everybody else is speaking about things, the more credibility we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that sort of marketing maturity cycle. You've probably seen it, where like sort of very early on in the maturity phase, you are basically reporting on just marketing activities like email sends and email opens. And okay, well, did they click through? All right, cool. But once you get to sort of the high end of that maturity cycle, once you get into a higher level, you're reporting on business influence. And that's really where you always want to be thinking. That's always what you want to be like creating marketing for. And because otherwise you're just sending pretty emails, and it really doesn't matter unless you can show that it actually moved the needle. And if it doesn't move the needle, you have to be very quick to pivot. And you again have to figure out, well, how do we show the influence here? How do we show that what we did all that time was actually worthwhile?
Wow. 100%. This is like its own episode. We could talk about this forever. But Carly, thank you so much for joining us on the Revenue Marketing Report. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, so I am online on LinkedIn. So I am /Carly J Cais. That's CarlyJCais. And I am at ElleSpark.com, and that's ElleSpark.com.
And for those of you looking for great material like this, check out calibermind.com.